What's your thoughts on the significance of propaganda films? Like, what kind of propaganda are we talking, right? Because I think Frank Capra is amazing. He's one of the best directors of all time. You could argue that most of his films are propaganda films. I don't think they did like demonstrable harm. He made actual propaganda films, though. He did. Uh, I think he's great. Like, are we talking Lenny Riefenstahl though? Like, are we talking Triumph of the Will? Because then we're talking something very different. Significance of propaganda films, almost every film is a propaganda film. Every film, I mean, if it believes in itself at all, it's trying to convince you of something political, something philosophical, or something psychological, or something sexual. You know, if we're talking about straight up like paid for by the government propaganda films, I mean, you can even call Iron Man one because like or those Transformers movie or any action movie made within the last 20 years because like the U.S. Army like allows them like pays to have proper representation within them. Like Top Gun Maverick is funded by like the fucking Navy and Air Force. Like those are propaganda films. Significance of them, they're still being made, and we just don't recognize them for what they are. You know. So far as like Triumph of the Will, that Lenny Riefenstahl Nazi propaganda movie, it's not even that good. Like edgy cinephiles need to stop saying that Lenny was good. She wasn't. She's highly overrated. Uh, it's not even good. Like we don't actually need it. My feelings on the significance of propaganda films just goes along with the significance of films. Right? Films have changed the world, changed culture, changed beauty standards, changed the thoughts people have about race, creed, color, or blah 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 blah. Films have changed all those things when film was relevant. Do I think that propaganda films now have any demonstrable impact? I mean, let's check. Uh, when Top Gun Maverick was released in 2022, if it had any sort of impact like the first film had, we should be able to see like a rise in people joining the Navy or the Air Force since that movie. And what, like 2023 enlistment stats, right? Like that's how you would figure it out. And like I don't know. I don't know. I don't think films are relevant at all anymore. Because in the 80s you can see some demonstrable effect that Top Gun Maverick had or Top Gun 1 had. I mean, hell, at both Maverick and Top Gun before the film, they showed you a Navy ad like for enlisting. And people during in the 80s when Top Gun 1 came out actually joined, but looks like last year um, three branches reported falling short of their recruitment goals. Like, so I don't even know if propaganda works anymore. And Top Gun Maverick was a massively successful film. So propaganda through films, I'm not sure if that works anymore. It obviously worked once upon a time, but I think that propaganda films or the significance that they used to have is irrelevant now because most films are irrelevant. Yeah. I think the Marvel films are fascinating in some ways, disturbing, new approach to American propagandist cinema. Absolutely. Like, okay, why? Okay, 2008 is when Iron Man came out, right? And like that's like Obama's first year in office. There were a couple things happening, recessions happening, bailouts happening. Why the fuck though? Why the fuck did superheroes become so goddamn big? And why the fuck were they big for what's this 2024 for like what like 15 years? Like why? Why? Like I get fads. Fads come in and out, like the erotic thriller didn't last fucking 15 years. Schwarzenegger and Stallone films weren't at peak popularity for 15 years. Like maybe westerns were around for a long time. But what about those superhero fucking propaganda films? Like you can argue that they're propaganda films, but like those superhero films just captivated audiences. And honestly, it was like the end of cinema's relevance was that movement. And I hate everything that the public saw within those characters. It just seems so desperate. Like, did we really feel that that lost, that helpless, that we had to call upon like Tony Starks of the world, these billionaire messiah figures, like to save us. Did we really feel this helpless, and that the government just didn't know anything? Did we really feel this entirely helpless that we had to see ourselves within superheroes for 15 fucking years? I get feeling helpless. That's like probably a constant universal thing, but the archetypes change, the characters change, the traits of that change. What the fuck? Like I'm so burnt out on like the Marvel discourse thing that now I'm just like upset about how long it's been going on. That there's like what, over 20 fucking projects in Marvel. That much of an appetite for being fucking helpless, for wanting to be a god. For like what the hell? And okay, so we can point out like films that had negative impact, but like so many had positive ones too. Like film is dangerous, but film can also be entirely helpful. Um, like it was a little like they were a little late to the party film wise, but Guess Who's Coming to Dinner had a very positive like impact on romantic race relations within the country. There's a like representation provides normalization repeated. Film's probably done more good than bad, right? It's just you have to understand that like everything that when you put it on film, it becomes cinematic and it becomes larger than life just by the process of it. So like you run the chance every time you make a film of having a negative or positive impact. Uh, at least nowadays, we don't have to worry about that because films have no impact. Like what were the impact of the Marvel films? Like what were their impact? Like what did people take away from it philosophically? Uh, I mean, I can't think of a world pre Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark where Elon Musk is a significant figure at all. Like maybe we actually did just start to believe billionaires. Like I don't know. I can't think of any actual positive effect that Marvel films had, or effect at all, like on human psychology. Because you can argue that they murdered they murdered Hollywood movie making, as we know. But philosophically, I have no idea what we took away from it. Marvel films made it cool to be a nerd. Did Marvel do that, or did Adam fucking Brody do that in the OC? I think Adam Brody did a better job at it. And okay, so like, what cultural impact though does making it cool to be a nerd? Like, what is that impact then? Like, what does that even mean? Nerds used to be like outliers though, or outsiders though. And what happened with made it cool to be a nerd was like Disney, this mammoth corporation, bought up these nerdy projects or IPs and properties, and suddenly the nerds became conformists overnight because Disney can't be shilling their products out to outsiders. They got to make them the insiders. Like so, even then, I don't even think it made it cool to be a nerd. I think that Adam Brody being Seth Cohen on the OC made it a lot cooler to be a nerd. Um, like, why did Marvel films do that and not Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies or even Nolan's Dark Knight series? Which, by the way, I think that both Raimi's Spider-Mans and Nolan's Batmans are better than anything that came out of the Marvel films. And even then, I love Joss Whedon's work, and I like Age of Ultron a lot actually. I think people don't read that film correctly. Um, and then what? Yeah, why go to Joss Whedon? I guess too to make the Avengers like the big movie that has to sell the entire connected universe idea. You went to a television auteur to do it, and people complain about the Avengers one, and they say that it feels like a television show. And I'm like, well, no fucking shit. They hired a television auteur to direct it. I, yeah, I would think so, and I think they knew what they were getting in return, the film they were getting in return. So like and that also came at a time when streaming was so big. So film itself, television spent fucking 40 years trying to be more cinematic, and now cinema is trying to be more like television. Like, I can't even follow it. Like, television, streaming, all that surpassed cinema after years of trying to be just like them, and they just surpassed them. And now cinema's like, shit, now got to be more like television again. Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's difficult to tell, like, the cultural impact. Like, it's almost an unfair question that something's had on a culture until like a decent amount of time has gone by, right? Because, like, think of all the online discourse that came out of Marvel and Star Wars and Disney movies, and it might be unfair even just to call them Marvel movies, right? Because I think it is Disney. Like if anything's going to have cultural impact, it's that. And it's what is it doing? I mean, you can say that, like, stroking the culture war, I guess. I don't fucking know. I cannot believe there's culture wars around Star Wars and Marvel, dude. I don't understand. Sidney Lumet also came from TV. So did Steven Spielberg, but he didn't come from being a genius of television, and neither did Spielberg. Whedon was like, helped not only reinvent television, but invent 90s television. Well, with Buffy, with Firefly, with Dollhouse, he was a genius television auteur. And like, when Lumet and Spielberg were working within television was still trying to figure out how it was presenting itself. And they really just filmed those like films. Whedon perfectly understood the structure and look and format of television storytelling. It's hard to compare television from the 90s to the 80s and from the 80s to the 70s. It's difficult. Like, almost like modern television really started in the 90s. Or 80s. You can say that, like, Next Generation, Star Trek could be like the first truly modern show that really understood television structure. You know, like, and I like older shows and things like that, but television didn't have a very clear idea of its own identity, I think, until the late 80s, of its own artistry and impact, really. I think the Marvel films meet a lot of Americans at their socio-political cynicism and does a magic trick to re-engage their commitment, if that makes sense. It does. It goes to something we said earlier. I forgot about what, but I was complaining. Oh, Spielberg's sentimentality. I was saying offering dangerously simple solutions to overwhelmingly difficult problems, right? I even think Alan Moore said something like that when he was asked about, like, the superhero craze, that they offer, like, simple solutions to impossible problems. And I guess that the issue is if the audience actually believes in that, you know? Americans at their sociopolitical cynicism. It does, but, like, I wish audiences were smarter, you know? I wish audiences were like, "Well, who's giving me this message? Who's re-engaging my commitment? Do they have a vested interest in my bank account, in my devotion as an audience member?" I don't get it. That's, like, the easiest thing to play on an audience for. But audiences love it. They fucking love it. Nolan's Batman series was too cynical, and Raimi's Spider-Man too saccharine to pull the magic trick off. Yeah, too sweet. Thank God. Thank God, though. Maybe, okay, is the magic trick, like, the magic trick you're talking about, you should write a paper on the magic trick, but the magic trick that you're talking about has certainly made its way into political and cultural discourse, which makes, like, complicated conversations simple, and they shouldn't be. Too cynical and then too sweet. Maybe that's what superhero movies should be, right? Or else they run the risk of people trying to bring that magic trick into their own lives. I don't know. I like the pre-Marvel superhero stuff a little bit. Like, Blade 1 was dope as fuck. So was Blade 2, actually. I never really liked Star Wars, but it revamped the sci-fi genre in mainstream. Yeah, I mean, I think George Lucas made a great film called A New Hope. He made a much better one called American Graffiti, though. That's like a lot more complicated, but of course, there's no fucking space wizards. I mean, I like Star Trek and stuff. Like, I'm not against sci-fi. I'm not a fantasy fan though, and I don't think Star Wars is science fiction anyway. Like, if we get down to it, I'm not really being like semantical. Not doing semantics here. It's literally the Lord of the Rings has more in common with Star Wars than it does with Star Trek. I think it's just fantasy, and I don't like fantasy. Fantasy is like the worst example of this magic trick that ML is talking about. That re-engages an audience member's commitment to something that they would ordinarily feel cynical about. But Star Trek has great philosophy. It does. It really does. I like I like quite a bit of Star Trek. I like the original series, Next Gen, DS9, Voyager. I even liked Enterprise. I like a lot of the not a lot of the movies. I like a couple of the movies too. Motion Picture, Wrath of Khan, First Contact. Might have to rewatch like the fucking Abrams verse ones because I'm fucking analyzing JJ right now. Might have to look into him again. Look into those movies. I remember them being good though. Sci-fi fantasy. Oh well. I'm still trying to figure out what the magic trick actually is. I think it involves parodying the people's cynicism while still acting on behalf of the hidden political interests. That has to be it. That has to be it. Let's think about it. Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it, ML. It's just that, let's see. Because, like, who are even. Because Marvel isn't about auteurs, right? I think that the only. Like, Joss Whedon with Age of Ultron, not even with his original 2012 Avengers, Age of Ultron is like the only movie out of every Marvel movie that feels like a Joss Whedon movie more than a Marvel movie. Like his philosophy, his existentialist philosophy got through that. Right? But every other Marvel movie, the company is the auteur, and that's where Marvel and Disney gets dangerous. Disney is the auteur behind every Marvel movie except for Age of Ultron, and that's why a lot of people don't even like Age of Ultron. So like we can't even go director by director and look at their philosophy and see if they align because it's all about the company. And of course the company has to be acting on behalf of hidden political interests. I think you're absolutely right. Putting it like that, it actually makes perfect sense that the MCU begins in 2008 with Obama's start. Yeah. But why did it keep going? Like, the MCU outlived a 2-term presidency and then outlived the Trump presidency and now is hopefully about to die at the end of a fucking Biden one. How long is that? It's so long. It did. Was that because it was made by a different studio, or is the director of that movie someone who's cool? Because that wasn't Louis Leterrier. No, he's not like cool. He just makes Fast and Furious movies. And now you see me. Felt different only because it didn't feel as uniform as the others, because I felt like that guy didn't watch Iron Man, because when that one came out, only Iron Man 1 was out, right? Like, how much of a concept did they even have? And Jon Favreau to me is just a hack. The guy who did the first 2 Iron Man movies, just a hack. Well, some fucking studio hack. So I don't really count him as anything. I think Incredible Hulk feels different because I don't think they really knew what they were getting involved with right then and there. Because the scene with Robert Downey Jr. in it that connects that to the MCU just feels like such a reshoot, like it was crammed in there. I think overall it is absolutely Disney. A company is an auteur, or like the most charitable you can be is that Feige, the producer, is the auteur, which is insane. That's not art. That's what Scorsese's talking about with MCU not being films. Films are normally made by artists, not by gigantic corporations with no face, or at the very best, that gigantic corporation spokesperson. What about Obama made people so fucking cynical? Like, cynical enough that you need a goddamn superhero, a god to solve it. No, we were already cynical, and Obama gave us the facade of hope. Okay. So you're saying, yeah, but he was actually acting on behalf of hidden political interests? Maybe it's still going because they infantilized the public. The movies are now a pacifier. Most of us still want to believe in magic as much as we want to ignore the likelihood of social collapse. Possibly. Is it like how you know something's huge is if it's like elsewhere, right? Because you can trace like the postmodernism being hip in the late 90s and early 2000s directly to the music of the time, to the art of the time, to everywhere, not just films, but every form of art. Like, can we take that magic trick and apply it to other people, or at least the weird billionaire messiah thing to other people? Like, can we do that? Like, was it in music? What was this infantilization within music? I think it had, right. Music's gotten simpler or whatever. We would have to provide examples of not only the infantilization, but of the paranoia in other forms of media for it to have, I think, really have been felt like that. And maybe it was. Maybe it was. Maybe Kanye West in a fucking nutshell, as a huge artist of the time, is equal parts infantilized and paranoid. Who fucking knows? Let's say that like we entirely agree, and people need to be infantilized. Is that why they're superheroes? Is that why they're action figures and not like something else? People just aren't interested in cool things. Every angle, the superhero phenomenon is boring. I just wish, okay, like it took. I just wish we got over it. I just wish we got over this whole fucking superhero thing. And I think we are getting over it, but like every time I think that the superhero thing is done, it completely monopolizes discourse again. And yes, I'm including Star Wars in the whole thing here. Because right now, if you go to YouTube and try to watch a video about media criticism, all you're going to find are acolyte videos. Like I include that there. And Disney didn't always used to make fucking nonsense. Some of their stuff was interesting to talk about once.